Hello everybody, and welcome to Tami's Tales, where I read stories for you. Today's story is called The Lazy Llama by Earle Goodenow, and as you can see, the book is in pretty sorry condition, mostly because it's a very old book that I've had since I was a little girl, and I think I drew in it. It tells the story of a lazy llama and his adventures. Let's get started. Luis was the name of a llama who lived in the Andes Mountains in Peru. He was terribly lazy. The other animals in the herd loved to climb up and down the mountains with their loads when their master Pablo told them to, but not Luis. Oh, no. Pablo tried to get him to do some work with the others. He coaxed and pleaded. He yelled and threatened, but Luis never stirred. Pablo even tugged and pulled, but Luis wouldn't budge. He just hated to climb mountains. Pablo tried pushing and shoving too, but it was no use at all. "I think I will only use this one to carry stuff down the mountain," he muttered. "That would be some help." So he turned Luis around and faced him down the mountain. But the llama only slipped and fell and rolled to the bottom. You see, he was too lazy even to hold back. You can imagine how much good he was to Pablo. None at all. Pablo went home to lunch. "What am I going to do with that Luis?" he asked his wife while he ate. "I don't like to get rid of him, but he is no good." She shrugged her shoulders. After lunch, Pablo was taking a siesta beside the door when he saw a man climbing slowly up the mountain. The man was dressed in city clothes and looked like an Americano. He was. After he had puffed a while in front of Pablo, he said, "I want to buy a nice quiet llama for my zoo in New York." "I have just such a one for you," said Pablo, getting up. "He is so quiet that sometimes I have to feel his pulse to make sure he is alive. You can have him for nothing." "Just what I want," said the man, "but I insist on paying." "Bueno, if you insist," sighed Pablo, "but take him. His name is Luis." They found it much easier to put Luis on a cart and lower him down the mountain than to try to get him to walk. "It's better that the llama be quiet," said the man. "Otherwise it might upset the rest of the animals in the zoo and frighten the children." So at the dock, Luis was hoisted aboard the ship because he was too lazy to walk up the gangplank. Pablo waved goodbye and shook hands with the Americano from New York. "Buenos dias," he said. "Come and see us again when you are down this way." Pablo stood on the pier and watched the big ship turn out to sea for the voyage north. Luis stuck his long neck through a porthole and gazed languidly back at him. Pablo waved once more. Already he was lonesome for that lazy llama. By the time the ship reached New York, Luis had changed. Maybe it was the air that was different, or maybe it was what he got to eat. Anyway, for the first time in his life he was full of pep and jump. He ran down the gangplank like a racehorse, dragging the man from the zoo along with him. And in his new home, Luis was no better. He wasn't quiet for a moment. He raced back and forth and around and around. He kicked up his heels and didn't stand still long enough for anyone to see what he looked like. The way Luis carried on did make the other animals nervous, and it did frighten the children. The zoo director was very, very upset about it. He sent a telegram to Pablo to tell him that things had not worked out at all as he had hoped. He explained that the llama that had been lazy in Lima was lively in New York. He would have to send Luis back. Pablo was not at all unhappy to hear that Luis was all over his laziness. He was still lonesome for Luis. He would be glad to buy him back. Pablo told his wife to give the telegraph messenger a bowl of soup. So Luis was taken back to the pier, where he leaped aboard the ship so fast that he knocked over half a dozen stevedores. But when they were out on the ocean and steaming south, a change came over him. By the time they reached the dock in Peru, whatever it was that had happened to pep him up had unhappened. Luis was his old self again. They had to get him off the ship in a sling. But Pablo was glad to see Luis just the same. After all, They were both natives of the same country. So he dragged Luis back again with a terrible amount of tugging and hauling. They didn't get home until late that night. Pablo still doesn't know what to do about Luis, except that he has found he makes a lovely pillow at siesta time. Pablo thinks that maybe while Luis was up north, he was only lonesome. Thank you for listening to the story. Come back next week for another Tammy's Tales, and I hope you have pleasant dreams.